She sat in the back of the squad car in handcuffs, accused of stolen valor by a town that worshipped its heroes. The rookie cop thought he'd busted a pathetic con artist. He had no idea the woman in his rearview mirror was the deadliest phantom in the United States arsenal. The rain was coming down in sheets over the logging town of Oak Haven, Washington, rattling against the roof of Officer Cody Gallagher's cruiser. At 23 years old, Cody was barely 6 months out of the police academy. He wore his uniform with a rigid, almost suffocating pride, desperate to prove himself to the veteran officers who still called him Kid. Oak Haven was a tight-knit community, a place where American flags fluttered from every porch and military service was treated as a sacred bond. So, when the dispatch radio crackled to life with a report of a disturbance at the Iron Skillet Diner, Cody flicked on his lights and hit the gas. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4, Cody said, gripping the steering wheel tight. "I'm 2 minutes out. What's the situation?" "Unit 4. We have a 415 inches progress. Caller states a patron is heavily intoxicated or hostile, refusing to leave. Caller alleges fraud regarding military benefits. Use caution." When Cody pushed through the heavy glass doors of the Iron Skillet, the air was thick with the smell of scorched coffee, fryer grease, and localized outrage. A crowd had gathered near a corner booth. Standing at the center of the commotion, red-faced and jabbing his finger like a bayonet, was Greg Harmon. Greg was a local mechanic, a vocal man who claimed to have served as a marine supply clerk during Desert Storm. He was the kind of guy who made his brief military stint his entire personality, and he was currently losing his mind. Sitting opposite Greg's fury was a woman who looked utterly unbothered. She appeared to be in her early 30s, with sharp, angular features, short-cropped dark hair, and a pale scar slicing through the right side of her jawline. She was eating a plate of scrambled eggs with slow, methodical precision. Draped over the back of her chair was a faded, olive-drab tactical jacket. Pinned to the chest was the Golden Eagle, Anchor, and Trident of the Navy SEALs. Below it, a subdued sniper tab.
"I'm telling you, Cody!"
Greg yelled as soon as he saw the uniform. He turned to the entire diner, playing to his audience. "This woman is a fraud! A flat-out liar! She just tried to use a veteran's discount for a $12 breakfast, claiming she's a Tier 1 operator. Women weren't even allowed in the teams until a few years ago, and there sure as hell isn't a female SEAL sniper walking around Oak Haven." Cody held up his hands, stepping between Greg and the woman. "All right, Greg, dial it back. Let me handle this." Cody turned his attention to the woman. She hadn't stopped eating. Her eyes, a cold, piercing steel gray, flicked up to meet his. There was no fear in them, no embarrassment, just a terrifying, hollow stillness. "Ma'am," Cody said, keeping his voice firm, trying to project the authority he felt he lacked. "Is there a problem here?" "No problem, officer," she replied. Her voice was quiet, raspy, and even. "I asked for the check. The waitress saw my jacket and applied the 10% military discount. I didn't ask for it. This gentleman took it upon himself to interject. Because it's stolen valor," Greg screamed, veins bulging in his neck. "It's a federal crime to financially benefit from fake military service. Arrest her, Cody. She's disrespecting everyone who actually bled for this country." Cody felt the eyes of the entire diner on him. The pressure was suffocating. He knew the law, the Stolen Valor Act of 2013, made it a federal offense to fraudulently claim military decorations to obtain money, property, or other tangible benefits. A discount counted. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see some identification," Cody said, resting his hand casually near his utility belt. The woman calmly set down her fork. She reached into her front pocket, pulling out a slim, black leather wallet. She didn't hand him a driver's license. Instead, she slid a heavy, matte black identification card across the table. It didn't look like any military ID Cody had ever seen. There was no standard DoD barcode, no branch insignia, just her photo, a digitized chip, and the name, Catherine Caldwell. Beneath her name was a string of alphanumeric characters that looked like a barcode but read like a cryptogram. "What is this?" Cody asked, squinting at the card. "This isn't a standard CAC card, Miss Caldwell. Do you have a state-issued driver's license or a standard VA card?" "That is my identification, officer," Catherine said softly. "I suggest you run it if you need to, but I'd advise against making a scene." Greg scoffed loudly. "It's a fake. Probably bought it online for $20. Run her name, Cody. You'll see. Cody unclipped his shoulder mic. Dispatch, Unit 4. Can I get a 10 to 29 and 10 to 27 on a Catherine Caldwell? Caldwell. He read off the strange string of numbers on the card, assuming it might function as a federal ID number. The diner fell into a tense hush. A minute passed, then 2. The silence was agonizing. Finally, the dispatcher's voice came back, sounding confused. Unit 4. I'm getting a complete blank. No DMV records in Washington or the surrounding states. I ran the ID number through the NCIC database. It kicked back an error code. No known military record. No social security matches. She's a ghost, Cody. The system literally says data does not exist. Greg burst into a triumphant laugh. I told you, she's a con artist. Cody looked down at Catherine Caldwell. A knot formed in his stomach. The lack of any record, no driver's license, no tax history, no military file, screamed fraud. To a rookie cop trained to see the world in black and white, the math was simple. She had fake ID, fake medals, and was receiving financial benefits. Miss Caldwell, Cody said, his tone dropping an octave, I'm going to ask you to stand up and place your hands behind your back. For the first time, a flicker of emotion crossed Catherine's face. It wasn't panic, it was annoyance. A deep, weary annoyance. Officer Gallagher, she said, reading his name tag. If you put those cuffs on me, you are going to open a door you cannot close. I am politely asking you to hand my card back and walk away. It sounded like a threat. Cody's training kicked in. Stand up, ma'am, now. Catherine stared at him for 3 agonizing seconds. Then, smoothly, she stood. She didn't resist as Cody spun her around, though he noticed her muscles were like coiled steel beneath her shirt. As the steel cuffs clicked around her wrists, the diner erupted into applause. Greg Harmon patted Cody on the back. Good job, kid. Keep the streets clean. Cody walked her out into the pouring rain, shoving her into the back of the cruiser. He felt a rush of adrenaline. He had done it. He had enforced the law, stood up to a con artist, and protected the town's honor. But as he looked in the rearview mirror on the drive back to the precinct, his confidence began to waver. Catherine Caldwell wasn't crying. She wasn't pleading for a lawyer. She was just staring out the window into the rain, looking like a predator patiently waiting for the cage door to open. The Oak Haven Police Department was a small cinder block building that usually dealt with noise complaints, petty theft, and the occasional bar fight. Bringing in a federal fraud suspect was a big deal. When Cody marched Catherine Caldwell through the double doors, Desk Sergeant Brody, a grizzled, 30-year veteran of the force, raised an eyebrow over his reading glasses. What do we have here, Gallagher? Brody asked, eyeing the dripping wet woman in cuffs. Stolen valor, Sarge, Cody said proudly. Suspect was at the Iron Skillet wearing a SEAL trident and a sniper tab claiming military discounts. Ran her ID. It's completely fake. NCIC has 0 record of her existence. No DMV, no federal background, nothing. Brody frowned, looking Catherine up and down. His eyes lingered on the way she stood, perfectly balanced, feet shoulder-width apart, eyes constantly tracking the exits, the cameras, and the holstered weapons of the officers in the room. Brody had served in the Army Rangers in the late 80s. He knew what a civilian in a surplus jacket looked like, and he knew what a killer looked like. Put her in interrogation too, Brody murmured to Cody. And Gallagher, tread lightly. Cody escorted her into the small, windowless room, uncuffing her so she could sit at the metal table. He took her wallet, her jacket, and her personal effects, placing them in an evidence tray. Sit tight. I'll be back in to take your statement. Catherine rubbed her wrists, her expression unreadable. You have about 20 minutes before this gets completely out of your hands, officer. Cody ignored her and walked out, locking the heavy door behind him. He carried the evidence tray to his desk and began cataloging her items. The black ID card, $42 in cash, and a phone. Cody picked up the phone. It was unnervingly heavy, encased in a matte gray housing with no visible brand name. There were no camera lenses on the back, and the screen was completely opaque. He pressed the power button. Instead of a typical lock screen, a harsh red light scanned his face, followed by a mechanical buzzing sound. The screen flashed a single word in bold white letters, UNA authorized. Suddenly, Sergeant Brody appeared over his shoulder. Gallagher, come look at this. Cody followed Brody to the main dispatch computer. I didn't like the NCIC error code you got, Brody said, pointing at the monitor. Usually, if someone is using a fake name, it just says, no record found. but look at the routing trace on her name and that ID number. Cody leaned in. The screen was filled with lines of code. At the bottom, flashing in yellow, was a text string. Error 404, restricted. .jsoc, dir, override required. What does that mean? Cody asked, his heart suddenly skipping a beat. It means, Brody said slowly, that her file isn't empty. It's buried. Deep. JSOC is Joint Special Operations Command. Gallagher, did you arrest an active duty operator? No, she's a woman, Sarge. Women weren't in the SEAL teams until, well, there's never been a confirmed female SEAL sniper. Greg Harmon said so, and he knows this stuff. It's an elaborate fake. She probably hacked a fake error code into her ID chip to scare off cops. Cody was talking fast, trying to convince himself as much as Brody. Go get her statement, Brody ordered, his voice tight. Now. Cody grabbed his notepad and practically ran back to interrogation 2. He slammed the door behind him, trying to project dominance. Catherine hadn't moved an inch. She was staring at the wall, but as he entered, her gray eyes locked onto his. Who are you really? Cody demanded, throwing his notepad onto the metal table. Because your little magic trick with the fake ID almost had my sergeant fooled. You want to tell me how you spoofed a JSOC error code? Catherine let out a slow, deliberate breath. Officer Gallagher, I am going to give you a sequence of numbers. I want you to go back to your desk, pick up a landline, and dial them. When the voice answers, you are going to read them my alphanumeric ID, and you are going to tell them my current geolocation. I ask the questions here, Cody snapped, feeling the control slipping from his fingers. You're facing federal fraud charges. You're looking at prison time. Cody, she said. It was the first time she used his first name. Her voice held a chilling gravity that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. 3 days ago, I was in a sandbox halfway across the world, doing things that this country will deny ever happened. I haven't slept in 72 hours. I came to this town because my father is buried in the Oak Haven Cemetery, and I wanted to eat a plate of eggs in peace before I visited his grave. You are currently interfering with a federally classified transit protocol. Call the number. She rattled off a 10-digit number with a 703 area code, Northern Virginia. Cody's hands were shaking slightly. He didn't want to believe her, but the absolute certainty in her voice was terrifying. He backed out of the room, locking it again, and retreated to Brody's desk. She gave me a number, Cody whispered to Brody. Dial it, Brody commanded. Cody picked up the precinct's secure landline and punched in the numbers. It didn't ring. There was a click, followed by a dead silence. Hello? Cody stammered. Authentication code, a synthesized voice demanded. Cody looked down at the slip of paper where he had scribbled the alphanumeric string from her ID. He read it out loud, his voice cracking slightly on the last digit. The line went dead again. 10 seconds passed. Cody was about to hang up, thinking it was a prank, when the line suddenly clicked open. The sound of a chaotic operations room, ringing phones, muffled shouting echoed in the background before a booming, authoritative voice cut through the noise.
This is Captain Arthur Hendricks, Naval Special Warfare Development Group. To whom am I speaking?
Cody swallowed hard. This is Officer Cody Gallagher, Oak Haven Police Department, Washington State. Officer Gallagher, Captain Hendricks said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, icy register. I am currently looking at a GPS beacon showing one of my assets sitting inside your precinct. You have precisely 10 seconds to tell me why.
She was accused of stolen valor, Cody stammered, his career flashing before his eyes. She had a SEAL trident. Sir, we had no record of her in the system.
Of course you didn't have a record of her, you absolute idiot, Hendricks roared, the volume making Cody flinch. Her file is classified above top secret. Her operational history is read-on only for the Secretary of Defense and the President of the United States. Cody felt the blood drain from his face. The room spun. She's a real SEAL? She is a Tier 1 asset attached to a ghost element you do not have the clearance to even conceptualize, Hendricks snarled. Listen to me very carefully, Officer Gallagher. You are going to go into that room, you are going to unlock her cuffs, you are going to return every piece of her property, and you are going to offer her your most profound apologies. In about 5 minutes, 2 black SUVs are going to pull up to your precinct. You will release her to my agents. If you or anyone in your department speaks to the press or mentions her name to a living soul, I will personally ensure you spend the rest of your life guarding a weather station in the Aleutian Islands. Do you understand me?" "Yes, sir," Cody choked out. The line went dead. Cody slowly put the receiver down. Sergeant Brody was staring at him, reading the sheer panic on the rookie's face. "Well?" Brody asked quietly. Cody felt his legs go weak. He looked toward the steel door of interrogation 2. "Sarge, we just arrested a ghost." Cody's boots felt like they were cast in lead as he walked back down the narrow, fluorescent-lit hallway toward interrogation 2. His breathing was shallow, his pulse thumping a frantic rhythm against his eardrums. He had spent his entire brief career trying to uphold the law, trying to draw a hard line between the good guys and the bad guys. In one morning, he had managed to arrest a woman whose security clearance was higher than the governor's, a woman who operated in the darkest, most lethal corners of the globe. Sergeant Brody followed a few paces behind, his hand resting on his duty belt, his face an unreadable mask of grim realization. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The silence in the precinct was deafening. Cody keyed the heavy lock and pushed the steel door open. Catherine Caldwell was exactly where he had left her, seated at the metal table, her posture perfectly straight, her gray eyes fixed on the blank wall. She didn't flinch when the door banged against the doorstop. With trembling hands, Cody stepped forward and fumbled with his belt, pulling out the small handcuff key. "Ma'am," Cody started, his voice barely a rasp. He cleared his throat, desperately trying to find a shred of professional dignity. "Miss Caldwell, I have received confirmation of your status." He reached behind her and unlocked the cuffs. The heavy steel ratchets clicked and gave way. Catherine slowly brought her arms forward, rolling her wrists to restore the blood flow. She didn't rub them, nor did she complain about the red indentations the metal had left on her skin. She simply looked up at Cody. "My apologies, Officer Gallagher," she said quietly, though there was no apology in her tone. "I told you it would get out of your hands." "I am so sorry, ma'am," Cody stammered, stepping back as if she were a live explosive. "We didn't know. The system gave us a blank, and with the new regulations and the guy at the diner, I was just following standard procedure for suspected fraud." Catherine stood up, her movements fluid and utterly silent. "Standard procedure is designed for a standard world, Cody. The world I inhabit doesn't exist on your computers, and it's better for everyone that it stays that way." Before Cody could offer another frantic apology, the heavy rumble of high-powered engines vibrated through the cinder-block walls of the station. Tires screeched on the wet pavement outside, followed by the aggressive slamming of heavy car doors. Sergeant Brody peered through the reinforced glass of the hallway door. "They're here." Cody rushed out of the room, leaving the door open for Catherine to follow. He arrived in the bullpen just as the front doors of the Oak Haven Police Department were thrust open. The rain blew in, carrying the scent of wet asphalt and ozone. Two men stepped into the precinct. They wore dark, impeccably tailored raincoats over charcoal suits. They didn't look like standard FBI or DEA agents. They moved with a synchronized, predatory grace, their eyes scanning the room, assessing every officer, every exit, and every potential threat in a fraction of a second. The lead agent, a broad-shouldered man with a closely cropped beard and earpiece, walked directly toward Sergeant Brody. "Sergeant Brody," the man said, flashing a leather credential case so briefly that Cody couldn't even read the agency acronym. "Agent Donovan, we are here for the package, and we are here for your digital logs." "We're cooperating fully, Agent," Brody said, his voice steady but respectful. "Officer Gallagher here has her personal effects." Cody hurriedly slid the plastic evidence tray across the booking counter. Agent Donovan didn't even look at Cody. He inspected the tray, picked up the matte gray phone, and slipped it into his pocket. He then handed Catherine's wallet and her olive drab tactical jacket back to her as she emerged from the hallway. "Rough morning, Cat?" Donovan asked, his tone softening only a fraction. "Just wanted some eggs, Donovan," Catherine replied, slipping her arms into the jacket. The golden seal trident gleamed under the harsh precinct lights. The second man, Agent Fisher, was already behind the dispatch counter, plugging a heavily encrypted flash drive into the precinct's mainframe. Wiping the CAD logs, dispatch recordings, and NCIC query history now, Fisher announced mechanically, "This incident never occurred. The 415 call at the Iron Skillet was a false alarm regarding a dispute over a parking space. Acknowledge." Brody nodded slowly. "Understood. A dispute over a parking space." Catherine walked toward the exit, pausing just as she reached the double doors. She turned back and looked directly at Cody. The anger had completely vanished from her eyes, replaced by a profound, heavy exhaustion. "Officer Gallagher," she said softly. "Yes, ma'am?" Cody replied, standing at strict attention. "Keep the streets clean," she said. It wasn't a taunt. It was a genuine directive from someone who fought in a much dirtier war. With that, she turned and walked out into the pouring rain. The agents followed, the doors swinging shut behind them. Seconds later, the black SUVs roared to life and sped away, leaving the Oak Haven Police Department in stunned, absolute silence. The rest of the day was a surreal blur. True to Agent Fisher's word, every digital footprint of Catherine Caldwell's presence in Oak Haven had been surgically excised from the system. The dispatcher's log showed a routine noise complaint. The NCIC search history was wiped clean. It was as if she had been a ghost who briefly materialized in their town, only to vanish back into the ether. But the physical reality of the morning lingered. Cody sat at his desk, staring blankly at his computer screen, his mind replaying the booming, terrifying voice of Captain Hendricks. He had touched a live wire of the American military-industrial complex, a hidden apparatus of lethality that most people only watched in Hollywood movies. Just before the end of Cody's shift, the precinct doors banged open. Greg Harmon strutted in, his boots tracking mud onto the linoleum floor. He looked incredibly smug, flanked by two of his buddies from the auto shop. "Hey, Cody!" Greg bellowed, leaning on the booking counter. "Just came by to see the perp walk. Did the feds come to pick up our little stolen valor princess?" I called the local paper, told them they might want to get a photographer down here. Sergeant Brody, sitting at his desk, closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. He looked at Cody, giving him a silent nod. "Handle it." Cody stood up. He didn't feel like a rookie anymore. The frantic need for validation that had driven him that morning was gone, burned away by the cold reality of what he had witnessed. He walked up to the counter, towering over the mechanic. "Greg," Cody said, his voice dangerously calm, "there was no stolen valor arrest today." Greg's smug smile faltered. "What are you talking about? I was there. I saw you put her in cuffs. She was wearing a sealed trident." "You saw me detain a woman for a misunderstanding over a parking space outside the diner," Cody said, looking Greg dead in the eyes. "She was a civilian, and she has been released without charges." "Bull!" Greg slammed his hand on the counter. "I know a fake when I see one. Women aren't SEAL snipers. You're covering for her because you screwed up the paperwork, aren't you?" Cody leaned in close, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Greg, you served 4 years in a supply depot. You did your job, and we respect that. But you have absolutely no idea what is happening in the real world. You don't know who is out there in the dark, keeping this town safe enough for you to sit in a diner and complain about your eggs. So, I am telling you, officially, the incident is closed. If you call the paper and file a false police report, I will personally arrest you for wasting department resources. Do we understand each other?" Greg stared at Cody, shocked by the iron in the young cop's voice. He swallowed hard, muttered something under his breath, and backed away, eventually turning and walking out with his friends. The precinct was quiet again. Brody looked up from his paperwork and offered Cody a small, approving smile. 3 days later, Cody was on a routine patrol near the outskirts of town. The rain had finally broken, leaving behind a crisp, gray Pacific Northwest afternoon. Without consciously planning it, he found himself turning the cruiser down the gravel path of the Oak Haven Memorial Cemetery. He parked the car and walked out onto the damp grass. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for, but he remembered her words, "My father is buried in the Oak Haven Cemetery." Cody walked the rows of granite headstones, reading the names and the military inscriptions. World War II veterans, Vietnam draftees. Finally, near a large oak tree at the edge of the property, he stopped. The headstone read, "Master Chief Richard Caldwell, United States Navy, 1955 to 2018, a beloved father." Cody stared at the grave, a profound sense of humility washing over him. The woman he had arrested wasn't a fraud looking for a free meal. She was a daughter, forged in the exact same fires of duty as her father, returning home to pay her respects between deployments that no one would ever read about. Resting on top of the granite headstone, glinting faintly in the overcast light, was a small, golden eagle clutching an anchor, a trident, and a flintlock pistol. Cody reached out, his fingertips lightly brushing the cold metal of the seal emblem. He took a step back, squared his shoulders, and delivered a crisp, perfect salute to the empty air. He knew he would never see Catherine Caldwell again, but he also knew he would never forget the ghost who taught him what true service really meant. The truth about our nation's heroes isn't always found in public records or loud boasts. Sometimes, the most lethal protectors are the ones society will never know exist. What did you think of Officer Gallagher's chilling encounter with a classified ghost? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of hidden valor and unexpected twists kept you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more incredible, heart-pounding stories.